The sound of rushing water can be peaceful, yet it can also remind us of an unsettling truth, that in many parts of the world this precious resource is slipping through fingers faster than we ever imagined, causing fears of a new kind of conflict. When we think of war, we often picture tanks rolling across dusty borders or jets soaring overhead. Yet today, a new battlefront is emerging on the banks of rivers and the edges of desertifying landscapes where nations are desperate to secure one vital element: fresh water. Across the globe, population growth and rapid urbanization have placed immense strain on existing water supplies, and we find ourselves grappling with droughts. In regions that once flourished, freshwater sources are shrinking. Aquifers are being depleted, and entire communities are left vulnerable to scarcity. From Las Vegas in the United States to Bangalore in India, water supplies are becoming more unpredictable. These cities face the urgency of having to innovate or risk running out. The situation is dire, and scientists warn that rising temperatures will only intensify the problem, leading to harsher and longer droughts. One prime example is Cape Town in South Africa, a city that nearly reached day zero when residents would have turned on their taps to find nothing but air. Municipal officials took drastic measures, imposing strict usage limits and investing in desalination plants to avert a catastrophic shutoff. They succeeded, but their story is far from over as climate shifts continue. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, Jordan is among the most water-stressed countries on Earth, hosting a growing population, as well as a flow of refugees. Jordan depends heavily on underground aquifers that are rapidly declining. To tackle the crisis, the nation has invested in large-scale desalination projects and water reuse technologies. But tensions simmer when neighboring countries seek similar limited resources. Not too far away, the River Nile has been a source of contention for decades. Its waters feed Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia, among others. And as Ethiopia pursues the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam to generate hydroelectric power, Egypt fears a potential threat to its water supply. Negotiations have been tense, with neither side willing to compromise on its perceived right to the river. In South Asia, conflicts over water are not new. The Indus River system has long been a source of friction between India and Pakistan. Both countries heavily depend on the river's flow for agriculture and hydropower. The Indus Water Treaty of 1960 established a framework for sharing, but new dams and shifts in climate test this agreement's resilience. China sits upstream of crucial rivers that flow into neighboring countries such as India, Laos, and Cambodia. And as China invests in dam construction to bolster its energy needs, downstream nations worry about reduced water flow. The Mekong River in Southeast Asia, for example, has faced declining levels, with local fishing communities bearing the brunt of shortages. In the United States, the Colorado River is a lifeline for over 40 million people across 7 states. Yet ongoing drought and excessive demand have drained reservoirs like Lake Mead. To alarming levels, states have entered into compacts to share the river's flow. But each year, the balancing act becomes more precarious, sparking disputes over water rights. Amid these tensions, technology emerges as a beacon of hope. Israel stands at the forefront with its sophisticated drip irrigation systems and large-scale desalination plants, turning seawater into fresh water for both agricultural and domestic use. These advancements have helped the nation thrive in an arid environment, and surrounding countries look on with interest, though the region is not free from conflict. Australia, another drought-prone nation, has pioneered water-saving strategies, including advanced irrigation, water recycling, and desalination, particularly in Perth. These methods have cushioned cities against acute scarcity, though environmentalists warn of the ecological impact of large-scale desalination on marine life. Singapore takes water security so seriously that it has designed an entire strategy known as the 4 taps to ensure every drop is maximized. They import water from neighboring Malaysia, collect rainwater in an extensive network of reservoirs, recycle wastewater into high-quality NE water, and desalinate seawater. The city-state invests heavily in research to refine these technologies. Meanwhile, India grapples with depleting groundwater in states like Punjab and Haryana. Over-extraction for agriculture has caused groundwater levels to plummet. Farmers continue to rely on age-old flood irrigation methods, but new initiatives promote drip irrigation and water harvesting to ease the pressure on aquifers. Though uptake is slow and challenges persist, in arid parts of Saudi Arabia, extensive fossil water reserves once allowed large-scale wheat cultivation. But those reserves are being exhausted, forcing the kingdom to outsource farmland abroad in places like Ethiopia and Sudan. These deals have triggered debate over land and water rights, fueling concerns that wealthier countries are acquiring scarce resources at the expense of local communities. As nations look for solutions, advanced desalination is gaining momentum. Membranes and filters continue to improve, yet the process remains energy-intensive and expensive. There is also the question of waste disposal, as concentrated brine can harm marine ecosystems if not handled carefully. In some regions, water is so scarce that it is trucked in daily, creating a black market where only the wealthiest can afford a stable supply. This leads to soaring prices and exacerbates inequalities. Local residents are caught in a vicious cycle of scarcity and poverty. Experts warn that water conflict could be the defining crisis of this century, as disputes erupt over access to rivers, lakes, and aquifers. Once fertile land is turning to dust, entire communities uproot themselves, migrating to cities or across borders in search of a livelihood. Climate change intensifies these problems, unpredictably flooding one region while parching another. Glacial melt in the Himalayas threatens to disrupt the water supply for hundreds of millions of people in China, India, and Bangladesh. As those ice reserves vanish, seasonal flows become erratic. In megacities like Jakarta, sinking land caused by excessive groundwater extraction combines with rising sea levels to leave parts of the city underwater regularly. The government plans to relocate the capital, but that is only a partial solution for millions who will remain in the region. We also see regional politics shaping water projects in ways that stoke tension rather than reduce it. Sometimes new dams and diversions are announced with little consultation among neighbors, fueling suspicion in places where trust is already fragile. Nations struggling with water shortages often invest heavily in technology to secure future supplies. But if these strategies fail, or if the technology is not shared equitably, water scarcity could accelerate regional conflict and set off a domino effect leading to broader instability. Amid these challenges, grassroots initiatives shine like beacons of hope in places like Kenya's arid regions. Local communities build sand dams and small-scale irrigation systems that harvest seasonal rainwater, providing relief in an otherwise parched landscape. These efforts reduce competition over limited resources. In California, farmers have turned to technology that uses sensors to deliver just enough water to crops, optimizing yield while preserving resources. Statewide water restrictions aim to curb waste and encourage more efficient irrigation, yet tensions between urban and agricultural users persist as each sector struggles to secure its share. The global thirst for water has also led to interbasin transfers, projects that redirect water from one region to another. China's South-North Water Transfer Project is a massive endeavor meant to relieve northern China's chronic shortages, but critics worry about ecological damage and the fate of communities in the path of diverted rivers. We see corporations investing in water projects aiming to secure supply for beverage manufacturing and industrial processes. Critics argue that privatizing water leads to higher costs for local consumers and reduces accountability for environmental damage whenever water becomes a commodity. Tension invariably grows. In communities across sub-Saharan Africa, NGO-led projects promote rainwater harvesting and solar-powered pumps, bringing relief to rural households that once walked miles to fetch water. While these initiatives spark hope, they also highlight the urgent need for broader policy and stable governance. Aquifers are the hidden reservoirs under our feet, but they are being tapped at unsustainable rates. Once depleted, some of these ancient stores cannot be renewed in human timeframes, leading to a looming crisis that few see. Until the wells run dry, scientists have warned that unless global warming is reined in, the water cycle will become even more unpredictable. With more intense storms, floods, and droughts, these extremes threaten to erode food security, forcing communities to fight over dwindling fresh water. The struggle is not confined to arid regions alone. Even countries abundant in water face localized scarcity due to pollution and contamination. Chemical runoffs from factories and farms render entire rivers unusable, forcing residents to search elsewhere for clean supplies. In the Arctic, melting ice is opening new shipping routes and potential claims to resources including freshwater locked in glaciers. Countries are now competing for strategic control of these territories, adding another layer to the global rush for water. While technology may provide temporary relief, a deeper transformation is needed. Experts argue that smarter agriculture, sustainable industrial practices, and comprehensive water management policies must work in tandem to ensure that water is distributed fairly without igniting new disputes. The uneasy truth is that most societies have historically taken water for granted, freely using and wasting it beyond sustainable limits. But the tide is turning as the reality of scarcity and the possibility of conflict become ever clearer to the global community. If we want to prevent the next global conflict from being sparked by water, we need a collaborative approach that transcends borders. Treaties alone are not enough. Trust must be built, and nations must share technology and knowledge so that every community has a fair chance at stability. Real-time examples of such cooperation include the Senegal River Basin, where riparian countries formed a joint organization that promotes equitable water sharing. The initiative has helped to mitigate disputes and foster regional solidarity, proving that diplomacy can prevent conflict. In contrast, tensions over the Euphrates and Tigris rivers remain high as Turkey builds dams for hydropower and irrigation. Iraq and Syria fear a decline in flow that could devastate agriculture. Attempts at negotiation are complicated by ongoing political turmoil in these nations. Water has also become a security concern in the Lake Chad region, once a massive lake supporting millions across Chad, Niger, Nigeria, and Cameroon. Shrinking levels have eroded livelihoods, fueling desperation and conflict. Extremist groups exploit the crisis to recruit young people who have lost their way of life. Elsewhere, the Amu Darya and Sir Darya rivers in Central Asia have historically been contested after the breakup of the Soviet Union. Newly independent states struggled to find a system of water allocation that satisfies upstream and downstream needs, leading to lingering resentments. In Europe, tensions over the Danube or the Rhine are relatively well managed under international frameworks, but flashpoints still emerge when pollution incidents or low flows spark cross-border disputes, reminding us that even stable regions must remain vigilant. Rivers like the Jordan are deeply entwined with historical and religious significance, complicating efforts to implement purely technical solutions. Here, water is not just a resource, but a symbol of identity and heritage, further entangling any diplomatic resolution. Still, cooperation can prevail. The water-sharing arrangements between Israel, Jordan, and the Palestinian territories show glimpses of promise despite political turmoil. The parties have worked to maintain projects that benefit each group in the face of a shared water crisis. This tug-of-war for water reveals the underlying truth that no nation can stand alone in the face of climate stress and resource scarcity. Regional partnerships become essential, as the environment does not recognize political boundaries or nationalistic ideals. Yet even with cooperation, the impetus lies in shifting the collective mindset from exploitation to stewardship. Only through sustainable management can rivers be revived, aquifers replenished, and disputes diffused. It is a monumental challenge, yet not impossible, where governments falter. Local communities sometimes step in, from constructing small check dams in India to replanting watersheds in Ethiopia. Citizens mobilize to protect water sources, understanding that their survival is at stake. These community-led actions can reduce migration and tension. Technological innovations such as water from air generators offer promise, especially for small communities reliant on limited supplies. Though still expensive, these machines capture humidity and condense it into drinkable water, a futuristic approach to bridging the supply gap. However, technology alone cannot fix inequalities. Large-scale desalination may power wealthy cities, but rural communities lacking funds remain vulnerable. Similarly, water purification methods are only effective if properly maintained, highlighting the need for robust infrastructure investment. Investment in research is crucial to create materials that make water filtration more efficient, and less energy-intensive. Breakthroughs in nanotechnology and chemical engineering could revolutionize how we harvest, store, and purify water, opening possibilities once considered science fiction. But time is of the essence. As populations soar and water tables drop, we risk crossing ecological tipping points from which there is no return. Ensuring equitable water access becomes more than a moral obligation. It becomes a prerequisite for peace and stability. The urgency of the situation demands swift international action, combining diplomacy, technology, and local empowerment, so that every region has a blueprint for resilience. Such forward-looking strategies might help avert the worst outcomes of water conflict, yet political will often lags behind scientific warnings. Short-term interests and election cycles overshadow long-term planning, leaving communities at the mercy of droughts, floods, or tensions that could have been mitigated through proactive measures. As water becomes scarce, the seeds of conflict are planted in the cracks of dried riverbeds. For those on the ground, the battle for water is as real as any traditional war. It shapes daily life, disrupts economies, and can topple governments, This is not a distant dystopian vision. It is the lived reality of millions struggling with water shortages right now, from the outskirts of Lima to the desert villages of Rajasthan. The pain of scarcity intensifies with each passing season. Without intervention, we risk witnessing wars fought not over oil or ideology, but over control of life's most fundamental requirement. Entire regions could destabilize under the pressure of dwindling supplies, with ripple effects felt worldwide. Yet if we act decisively, there is hope for a future where water is sustainably managed and shared. Instead of a trigger for conflict, it can serve as a catalyst for cooperation, a reason for nations to unite in preserving what sustains us all. We must acknowledge the interdependence of our water systems and the fragile bonds that tie us to neighbors near and far. In doing so, we can foster an environment where technology thrives, diplomacy endures, and communities are empowered to adapt. This journey demands resilience and innovation, from policy changes that ensure equitable water rights to education programs teaching conservation from local aqueducts to massive transnational water projects. Every step we take shapes the path ahead. Our responsibility is to guarantee that future generations do not inherit a planet racked by water wars, but rather a place where rivers flow clean, lakes sparkle with life, and conflicts become a relic of a less enlightened era. The fate of freshwater resources rests in our collective hands. While the threat of conflict grows, we possess the tools to avert such a disaster by embracing cooperation, investing in smart technologies, and committing to protect this indispensable asset. Human history tells us that scarcity has driven conflict, but it has also driven ingenuity. If we harness that spirit of innovation and collaboration, we can chart a course away from strife and toward security, ensuring that water remains a source of life and not a catalyst for war. Hope emerges in each success story that sees wastelands transformed into fertile fields through careful management, or cities once on the brink of running dry discovering sustainable lifelines. These glimpses of progress remind us that we can turn the tide. Yet every day we wait, the challenges grow more complex. The window of opportunity narrows, and the risk of conflict rises like a flood. We cannot afford indifference, not when the stakes are as high as peace itself. So as the world gathers to discuss climate goals and sustainable development, water must remain at the forefront. It is the common thread linking food security, energy generation, health, and stability. Only by safeguarding it can we safeguard our future.